Good morning. This is the Political Line podcast. I'm your host, founder and editor of the Political Line, and we have a pretty jam-packed show today. We're going to be discussing shutdown politics. We're going to be discussing the results of the shutdown politics, and most importantly, I think we're going to be discussing what are going to be the consequences of that as we're starting to see some of this trickle through in the idea that polling numbers are starting to come out, and some of these polling numbers are just absolutely devastating. And I think in order to put the polling numbers into context first, we have to understand where conservatives are coming from that standpoint. And there's a poll that highlights this perfectly. Democracy Corp released a poll a few days ago now here, and one of the findings that they have is essential that Republicans feel as though they are losing the country, or they've lost the debate to Obama, and they're now losing the country. Their way of life is changing. The way that they, their values are being replaced with multicultural values. They describe it as the homosexual agenda. The country is changing. So in this poll that was put together by Democracy Corp, they actually put together a focus group with three factions of the Republican Party. And these factions were Evangelicals, the self-described Tea Partiers, and then self-described moderate Republicans. The foundation of all of these groups, even though inter-party they have a different belief system structure of how the country should be governed, the foundation of all of this was the fact that they have lost. They've lost the debate, they've lost the discussion, and the country is now moving in a direction that runs counter to their belief system. So I think to get inside the mind of the Republican Party, to understand this first and foremost is to understand the context of what is going on here, right? To understand the context of the country as a whole. But out of this fear, out of this context of, we're losing our country is falling behind, culturally things are changing, the ground is shifting beneath us, out of this fear, out of this irrational idea, a concept of, losing to Obama, which is essentially the core. And Obama is not necessarily the issue. I mean, they personalize this, which I think creates all kinds of unintended consequences in your political fight. When you personalize the debate, the discussion, it tends to skew the reality of things to the extent that you begin promoting irrational ideas. And let me give you a concrete example of this. Because Republicans personally hate Barack Obama, they feel compelled to oppose anything that is proposed by Obama, even if it is the Republican Party platform position for healthcare reform. If you remember back in the 90s, the Heritage Foundation crafted this idea, this concept of the individual mandate, which then grew into this idea and actually put into policy action by a Republican governor from the Northeast, Mitt Romney. Romneycare is the forefront of Obamacare, and of course we all know that has been, determined all through the last year's election. But to understand, to go into this context, how did Republicans come to the conclusion of opposing Romneycare? You have to look at it through the lens of their personal animosity, the personalization of politics, to really understand where Republicans are coming from in this overall concept. But this leads me to the point that the Republican base, because of this context of feeling that the ground is shifting beneath them, that the country's changing culturally, that they feel that they have to do or say anything they can to hold the base together, to drive the message forward. And this is why we are in a position now where, Republicans are essentially lying to their base about their ability to repeal Obamacare. And that's where we are debate-wise, under the policy, Republicans are lying about their ability to do this. This has been somewhat of a rallying cry for the right for about 3 years now. Unfortunately, shutting down the government doesn't actually stop the implementation or even the funding to Obamacare. So there's actually only one way to stop any of the funding for Obamacare, and that's passing a law in both houses and having the president sign it. Now, we know that the political reality of that is just simply not true. It's just not going to happen. The president has said time and time again he will not sign a law repealing or replacing the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare. There's a couple of reasons for this. So I think there was a quote, first off, from Salon that talks about the effects of what is actually affected by the government shutdown. And I want to read part of that quote for you. It says, "Part of the reason a shutdown wouldn't stop the healthcare law is that government doesn't grind to a halt. National defense, law enforcement, air traffic control, and other activities involving the safety of human life and the protection of property continue." And this next part is a big piece here. Ditto for big entitlement programs such as Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, whose mandatory funding does not have to be renewed annually by Congress. The Affordable Care Act is the newest edition of that club of budget heavyweights. The employees who administer such programs may also be considered essential. During the Clinton-era shutdowns, Social Security brought back 50,000 employees to handle claims works after initially giving them furloughs. So no, Obamacare also will not be defunded in a shutdown. It will not stop. I think this point is worth re-emphasizing and to make clear. The only way that Obamacare can be defunded is by passing a law that specifically defunds it in both chambers, the House and the Senate, and then having the president sign it, or of course overriding a president's veto with 2/3 of the House, which doesn't currently exist right now. There's a reason for this. The budgeted programs and laws are funded, which is called mandatory funding. So there are 3 types of spending mechanisms: discretionary spending, mandatory spending, and net interest. Net interest deals with the debt and servicing of the United States debt, so we won't really be talking too much about this. And so what we're going to be talking about is discretionary spending and mandatory spending. Discretionary spending is optional as part of our fiscal policy, in contrast to entitlement programs for which funding is mandatory. Basically, discretionary spending, which is spending that is not specified by a law passed by Congress and signed by the president, is optional and subject to the particular likings of Congress. So when we talk about the appropriations process, they're talking about what Congress funds, pet projects and whatnot. This is not funding that comes through a specific law that has been passed, like the Affordable Care Act. There are major entitlement programs: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and you can now add the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare, to that list that's considered mandatory spending. There are other smaller mandatory spending programs like SNAP and TANF, but the programs such as Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, Affordable Care Act account for about 70% of all mandatory spending. So mandatory spending is spending enacted by a law, but not dependent on an annual or periodic appropriations bill. So Congress is lying to the right. Ted Cruz and company are lying about their ability to actually repeal these things because they just simply, the political reality is not there. So the first attempt that any of these groups are going to have at actually defunding Obamacare is going to come January 20th, 2017, if and when there is a pro-Obamacare repeal president in office. Otherwise, this simply is just not going to happen. So what is all this actually about? Well, I mean, I imagine a lot of it is about fundraising. I know Ted Cruz has shot to the front of the Iowa caucuses because of this. And, I think that's really ultimately what a lot of this is about. But these policy positions do not exist. These lies, these policy positions do not exist in a vacuum. There are going to be consequences for this. the Republicans are going to pay the price for that. And just to give you a little bit of a snapshot, and I want to preface these poll numbers by saying that there's certainly more at play here going on than just simply the idea that Republicans have shut down the government or that they're defunding Obamacare. I mean, there are certainly other elements of the policy discussion that is going on that play into these factors. But just to give you a snapshot of where the Republicans are heading, we have poll numbers out from the University of Mary Washington on the Virginia governor's race that has Terry McAuliffe leading Virginia Attorney General Ken Cuccinelli by 7 polling points. McAuliffe's at 42%, Cuccinelli is at 35%. Again, there are certainly other aspects and elements at play here that are affecting the overall mentality of this race, but this plays into the larger narrative that Republicans are losing ground among voters. Secondly, and this is certainly part of the whole, but I wanted to bring this up. Marco Rubio, a potential 2016 presidential contender, is polling at 45% in his home state of Florida. He could have some issues back home in 2016. Now, 2016 is 3 years away. That being said, that is almost 3 lifetimes or 3 eternities from now in the political world. But to be polling at 45% in your home state and try to run a presidential race on a national level, especially in a Republican primary, this could be the end of Rubio's career if he tries to balance both of them. 2 of the top contenders are polling within the margin of error: Alex Sink at 42% and Debbie Wasserman Schultz at 43%. But I want to really get into how the shutdown and the opposition of opposing Obamacare is really starting to have a weight on the House of Representatives, particularly the Republicans. PPP polls looked at 24 House districts and the effects of the shutdown, weighing these districts, and they have basically concluded that the House of Representatives is now up for grabs in 2014. So we are obviously a little over a year away from any type of election that will determine this, but these numbers are not good. They've got a number of districts. Republicans have a number of districts that are at risk for losing the seat. There are 24 districts that were polled in total, and the Democrats only need to capture 17 of these seats in order to win the House of Representatives. So the fact that 24 districts potentially could swing to the Democratic side is problematic for the Republican Party. They should be worried about this. They should be concerned. Shutting down the government in these districts is not playing well. Republicans are now being blamed by 44% of Americans now blame the Republicans for the shutdown. And inside these districts, there is another dynamic of politics at play here. These are swing districts. They're districts with lots of federal employees. So you're looking at districts in Virginia. You're looking at districts in Pennsylvania, South Jersey. These types of districts are home to lots of federal workers. They've got military bases that basically drive the engine of the economy. And when they are shut down, they're going to blame the person in office. And it's going to be very easy for a politician, local city councilman or a state representative or a state senator of sorts to come in and say, Washington's broken, Washington is dysfunctional, you need to throw these guys out of office, send me to Congress, and I'll put some common sense back into these people. So I think the Republicans should be worried about this PPP poll. It is a year from now, but with 24 House districts essentially up for grabs, the Republicans are going to have to play some serious defense. So this is the Political Line Podcast. I'm your host, founder and editor of the Political Line. Thanks for listening, and I hope you can tune back in. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at Political Line and on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Political Line. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you again. Have a good day.